I'm very pleased to have PK Das with us today. We've been talking to him for a very long time. He's an old friend, and I'm really, really pleased to be able to bring him to Bangalore after after a very long time of these conversations. PK Das is he likes to call himself an architect activist. So he's, as he was telling us yesterday, an accidental architect because he came in and worked on design and architecture. But he started with looking at revitalization of informal settlements in Mumbai. He's been involved with a number of activist movements to prevent slum demolition, to resettle people with justice and dignity in Mumbai. And he's also been very involved with a number of revitalization movements in Mumbai. You should look at the large areas of waterfront that are available now to people as commons because of his and collective efforts, which he was part of, but which he spearheaded in a number of very fundamental ways. I think much of the Mumbai story that he can talk about today is a universal story that can give us hope in Bangalore. Because as you see, when you talk to policymakers, planners, funders, investors, or even your regular woman or man on the street, you will always hear them say, give them an example of, let's say, a Barcelona, which has done urban revitalization, or a city in Thailand, which has, taken a buried river under concrete and brought it back. And they say, oh, but that's all foreign countries. We can't do that here. I think if you can do it in Mumbai, you can do it in Bangalore. We should be doing it in every Indian city, right? And so PK Das is a wonderful story that we can learn from. He's also been very inspiring. He teaches and lectures at many places, from New York to Mumbai to across the world. He's the winner of the first Jane Jacobs Award. And as many of you know, Jane Jacobs is an inspiration for all of us who are thinking about cities and urban design, about how communities can live together in collectives. And he's received many other awards that I will not start to name here because otherwise we'll run out of time. But without further ado, then let me just invite PK. Please take.
Thank you, Harini, with that tall introduction. And I hope at the end of the presentation, you will think what she said was right or wrong. It's been I'm so very happy to be here at the Bangalore International Center with an invite from the Azim Premji University and the BIC. And I'm so happy to have all of you here to discuss this evening some of the very critical issues that we are all challenged by. So that's the way I have kind of titled my talk today: Celebrating Interconnectedness and the Making of Cities. Let me start first by remembering Dr. Madhav Gadgil. As a mark of my immense respect for him, his honest and dedicated activism, research, and writings on ecology is deep-rooted, inspiring me and generations. His thoughts are insightful, providing a critical understanding of the complex yet self-sustaining world of an interconnected and interdependent ecology. Ramchandra Guha describes Dr. Gadgil as someone with an abiding concern for social justice and a profound skepticism of those in power. Dr. Harini Nagendra remembers Dr. Gadgil as a scientist who consistently placed communities at the center of environmentalism. And Dr. Gadgil writes, "The purpose of scholarship is not merely to understand, but to deploy that understanding towards action." I think some of these words and memories and the works of Dr. Gadgil, we will carry forward forever with us. Today, we the people are most concerned and affected by acts of violence perpetrated by the ruling dispensation and the neoliberal political order to break down the interconnectedness of an inherently sustainable political, ecological, or planetary order. This is seen across the world, from most severe acts of war that we witness now in many parts of the world, to brutal destruction of nature, the polarization of people and places, and sadly, the normalization of conflict at every level. I mean, you walk into a cafe, you be on the roadside, it's there everywhere, internalized, and people, in a way, kind of are happy about it in social, cultural, and everyday ways of life, despite many notable resistance to this ongoing violence. On one hand, we witness the continuing attack on nature and its rampant destruction. I would like to cite here just two very recent examples which are worthy looking at. The case of Aravalli Hills and the destruction of 45,000 mangroves in Mumbai for construction of a flyover or a expressway. In the case of Aravalli Hills, the recent Supreme Court's observations is an important reminder of the values of interconnectedness, reflecting on the government's various definitions relating to the height and distances between two hills, and an earlier bench approving the government's perverted version. It was actually government who presented in policy paper, which the Supreme Court then accepted it. The earlier Chief Justice of India and his bench. But the current bench stated, not decided yet, but has stated that. And it says, it notes while staying that the court observed that a government's definitions would lead to eventual erasure or degradation, thereby compromising the overall ecological integrity of the Aravalli ranges. And I continue with the quote, excluding the intervening areas between two hills, more than 500 meters apart would create a structural paradox and narrow the geographical scope of protected territory. Further, it observed that it is important to maintain the structural and ecological integrity of the entire range. So I think these are some of the very important observations. These are some of the recent newspaper publications of the 45,000 mangroves that's been cleared by the Mumbai High Court, a proposal by the state government. And you can see on the left slide that they run the flyover on the creek, the Malavani Creek, which is such a wonderful creek. Some of the slides, you can see that little slide of mine on the top. That's actually a slide by me in the middle. And that's how it looks. That's how fascinating and rich the ecology is. And they decide now to run the flyover in the middle of that wonderful creek. The bench also took note of claims that decades of unchecked urbanization, systematic deforestation, and intensive resource extraction have exerted immense strain upon the inherently fragile ecosystem. Now, it's another thing what happens after the Supreme Court order, even if it's positive, what happens then in implementation, etc. I will not get into it at this point of time. On the other hand, the continuing polarization of people and places, increasing communal hatred, and the media inciting public opinion with spectacles of the violence is rapidly destabilizing the sustainability objectives. I will not get into the details of this, but you are aware of Angel Chakma's murder, being a suspect as Chinese, and then a migrant worker in Tamil Nadu, and another incident here in Karnataka, where all of them were suspected to be Bangladeshis and were mercilessly beaten up. The severe strain of both of these violent phenomena, that is one on nature and the other the polarization of people, is causing unprecedented anthropogenic shifts, including the climate crisis, and demands urgent intervention through protracted struggles across various sectors and solidarity movements. This is very, very important. The bitter impact and consequences of both these acts of organized violence, have been on the social and environmental aspects of life in our cities too, with increasing numbers of people being pushed to the margins. So this was a graphic done by me and distributed in a public exhibition to put up, that how more and more people are being pushed to the margins in every way that can be. Today, cities are in a state of inclusionary crisis. Most people's access to housing, healthcare, education, and recreation are denied, being unaffordable. Also, natural ecology is trampled and destroyed, and common property resources colonized for private profit of a few. An effective way forward, these are slides of Mumbai where in the name of Dharavi's rehabilitation of those who are not eligible slum dwellers, the governments have now permitted to build on salt pan lands. I mean, these are our defense forces that work magically, the ecological assets. And those will now be occupied. So you can imagine the extent of threats that we have. An effective way forward is for many social and environmental struggles to build solidarity across issues and narrow silos for liberation and environmental justice. The basis and the trigger for building solidarity movements would be various city-making endeavors, which aggressively promote the idea of exclusive cities possibly in two different ways. One is the oppressive built form through the divided or territorialized spaces and land use meant to exclude most people. And the second, the vandalized state of the natural ecology. Now, here are some incredible examples, sad examples. I don't know if they're incredible, but incredible in the other way, that how buildings are being constructed and how slum dwellers are being rehabilitated in some of those buildings on the slides above that you can see, and including the one on the left, and how then commercial development is carried out for sale. Now it is necessary to recognize and celebrate the interconnectedness, to understand, revive, reinvigorate the natural connections between different forms of life that constitute a sustainable planetary order. Therefore, public celebrations of the interconnectedness are a must beyond the boundaries of caste, religion, gender, class, and cultures to make cities equal and accessible to all. An important start would be to break these boundaries of segregation and stitch the fissures that define our cities today. The interdependent relationships between people and nature must be celebrated too. For celebrating the interconnectedness in the making of the city, I suggest an idea of linear parks as an effective democratic means of resistance towards equity and justice in social, spatial, and environmental terms, thus challenging the prevailing order of centralization, hierarchy, and control, and demanding decentralization of power through that process. I will explore its implementation, including its successes and shortcomings, with reference to a particular movement in Mumbai. The linear parks and climate response is how I've titled the next section. Imagine a structure of linear parks, streams of water, trees, people, and neighborhoods across the multiple boundaries defining the ecology of cities. Let streams of linear parks define a new city landscape, breaking away from the large monocentric spaces to a fluid stream of linear open spaces, meandering, modulating, and negotiating varying neighborhoods. Akin to the fluidity of rivers and watercourses, such a structure of open spaces would relate to and integrate with many more areas and people. The Open Mumbai Plan, or the Linear Parks Network, prepared by Mumbai Waterfront Center and PKDA architects in the year 2012, proposes a city-wide network of connected public spaces that include the natural areas and the different biosystems. A scenario where Mumbaikers have easy access to over 600 kilometers of landscape walking and cycling tracks and open spaces along the 300 kilometers of the water courses. Now, this map was put up in a public exhibition for over 6 months at the MGMA. And this was printed in about 20 feet long plan. So, but you can roughly see that what we've tried to do is Mumbai has this incredible asset of natural areas, and we've tried to connect them all and create a contiguous public space, breaking down those borders as explained to you. This is very quickly a glimpse of the extent of the water courses that the city has, but is little realized. I'll get into the details later, but it's an incredible map, which is rarely seen and realized by most people, including governments who know it, but they bury it. And this is actually a map from the documents of the municipal corporation. The plan brings to light, this was part of the data that we had put in. I mean, it's kind of, the total area of the natural areas is 30% of the area of Mumbai, as big as that. But it's never part of the planning process. The plan brings to light the continuing degradation of the vital 140 square kilometers of the natural areas of the city. So it's not small, 140 square kilometers. It's mangroves, wetlands, creeks, salt pans, rivers, lakes, beaches, hills, forests, and proposes interventions for their protection and integration. Sadly, the city has turned its back to this vast extent of the natural areas and considered them as the dumping ground, both physically and metaphorically, leading to their rampant destruction and degradation. So this is the kind of ways where we've been sort of dealing with and treating natural areas. Adding to the misery, the city government has channelized them, increasingly have channelized most of the water courses by building impervious concrete walls along their edges, thus further severing their ecological and environmental attributes and separating them from the people. Over the years, these vital streams have been turned into nallas for disposal of wastes, which takes effluents to the sea. Nallas is an example of discontent and abuse, and they connote filth and stink. There is very little knowledge of them being rivers and natural water courses that define the landscape at a point of time of the city. Similarly, the construction of the impervious concrete walls along the rivers, like the Sabarmati River and the rivers and water courses across cities of India, which has really caught the wind of the Sabarmati model and is being fast taken up for execution by many, many municipal corporations in their cities, severes the symbiotic relationship between water and land and people. This is an interesting graphic which was done in the office in our studio by, there's that wall which is in the process of being built, and it's like a knife being driven through the ecological, the life of the ecology, and it's bleeding at that point. And you can see in contrast the right side as it existed, this wonderful natural flora and fauna and birds coming here in thousands, and there's all kinds of species that survive through that process. But it's interestingly also, in the last year I'd been to Ahmedabad when I suddenly witnessed the floods, and the water breached all those limits and ran over the promenades and all those spaces that you can see. In short, the large sand beds were buried by land filling, and with these huge concrete walls then taming the water. And what would happen in the downstream is another story of flooding. Similarly, land filling continues to be a big activity of the governments. The massive 600-acre land filling of the Mithi River floodplains, wetlands, and mangroves in Mumbai to build more. The Bandra Kurla financial hub has exposed the continuing vulnerability of flooding and other ecological disasters. Yet, land filling continues indiscriminately. So this is unbelievable. 600 acres of land filling to create this business district into the Mithi River plains. And that today is the model of and symbol of our progress and development. The understanding of nature, rather of every earth system, by most governments is not considered important, rather deliberately ignored, thereby influencing public understanding of its significance. Also, governments continuously build walls and invest in high-cost engineering and technological measures to contain and challenge the forces of nature despite miserable failures. Through this movement, the IRLA movement, our idea is to question such a build more syndrome. I call it a build more syndrome that has deeply affected the ruling dispensation and turn these abused backyard spaces, including the Nalla reinvigoration work, to a proud social, cultural, and environmental forecourt. So that's the key objective. I move in now to explain the idea of the linear park's geometry and the accessibility question. Why linear parks as an idea really is terrific to bring people and places and nature and natural areas together. The very geometry of the linear parks enables an effective understanding of the interconnectedness for the achievement of a sustainable ecology and enable easy access to more people than a large central park somewhere. David Maddox, a close friend of ours, of Harini and mine, who's a scientist and publishes this incredible journal called The Nature of Cities from New York, and there are over 600 contributors, writers to that, writes, imagine three hypothetical parks, but they're shaped differently. One is a square, the other two progressively longer and thinner. Consequently, they differ in the total lengths of their perimeter. 8 kilometers around the edge of a square park, 10 kilometers for the rectangular one in the middle, and 17 kilometers for the thinnest and the longest one on the right. And I continue with his quote, we know that we have crisis of access to green and open spaces in many of the cities of the world. We assert that everyone should have access to the benefits of nature and ecosystem services, from the enjoyment of biodiversity to clean air and protection from storms. As a matter of justice, through the lens of equitable access, linear parks are major opportunities in urban design and planning to improve the lives of millions of people. Unquote. The idea of linear parks challenges the idea of centralism, which I mentioned in my introduction, of amenities, markets, civic services, public spaces, parks, and most importantly, of political power. Creating multiple unbarricaded linear structures of interconnected places and people within existing built form of the city would be an important intervention, thereby enabling the formation of an engaging and participatory democratic order to bring about the much needed change towards sustainability. Inevitably, the linear park's formation includes and integrates all natural areas and elements. Here's a map of Mumbai. In fact, we were the people to first map all the natural areas and the open spaces of the city. This was carried out through my studio on voluntary capacity, and it was put up in a very big exhibition called the Open Mumbai Exhibition. And we realized, and we also did the mapping and the determination of the areas of each natural area and the assets that we have and the open spaces, and how much of those open spaces, as marked in the development plan of our cities, still exist and how many of them have been encroached, etc., etc. The rivers, watercourses, lakes, ponds, wetlands, creeks, mangroves, and forests. Together, these areas in the case of Mumbai cover an area of 140 square kilometers, being as much as 30% of the total area of Mumbai, as I mentioned earlier. This vast extent of natural areas has been turned invisible, being inconsequential and excluded from the government's planning discourse. So we prepare the development plans and we leave out these areas from the development plan. We squabble over the balance 240 square kilometers of the land area of the city to build more. But in that process, many things happen of encroachments into these areas. Today, as cities get divided, places and people are categorized and classified, and their access to resources and opportunities are regulated based on class, gender, and majority and minority community basis. The streams of linear parks have the potential to cut across multiple barriers, challenge the ecology of segregation, and enable the interconnectedness of the city. Further, through placemaking effort in linear parks, with focus on neighborhoods and participation, a stronger network of people would be possible. Also, it would be possible to popularize the natural areas to uncover the invisible and realize the benefits of the ecosystem services, biophilia, happiness, beauty, and biodiversity, clean air, cooling, resilience to shocks due to climate events, and recreation outdoors, thus overcoming the severe relationship between people and nature. This is one of the key objectives of this movement. Most importantly, this would help to evolve an effective climate action program through wider public dialogue, a process that has been systematically erased by successive governments. And this is one of the things we all have to consciously make effort, is to keep having public dialogues on all sorts of issues, because our voices are being muffled and public discourses are being suppressed. This is the overarching vision that has manifested itself in a tangible pilot project, the Irla Nala reinvigoration movement. Hopefully, these ideas and experiences of Mumbai, the issues they raise, as Harini also mentioned, will resonate in the experiences that you have in your places, in your respective places of familiarity. I now get on to the case of the Irla Nala invigoration movement. In the year 2013, the citizens of Juhu, which is a neighborhood in the western part of Mumbai, along with PKDA architectural practice, launched a significant movement for the conservation and integration of the 7.5 kilometer Irla Nala in their neighborhood. Now, if you look at that slide, the blue is the Irla Nala that sort of connects to the sea, both at the top, which is the northern end, and at the bottom, which is the southern end. And it runs through the neighborhood of Juhu, etc. Now, this is an interesting slide from a book that we published called the Juhu Vision book, which is used for campaign during that project, during that movement. And it's very interesting how Juhu was the extreme left slide. It was all seawater, marshy land, and palm groves throughout, and how gradually over time it's been built upon to what we have currently is in the extreme right slide, the formal planning and the land use map. So just an interesting slide I thought I'll share to know how land use and how developments have kind of moved on. Irla Nala is a part of the over 300 kilometers of Nallas in Mumbai that were originally, I showed you this slide. These are the 300, this is actually 800 kilometers, but 300 kilometers are the major Nallas, which were really the watercourse, the original watercourse of the estuary. Irla Nala is a part of the 300 kilometers of the Nallas in Mumbai that were originally natural watercourses or rivers connected to the sea and thereby to the tides. These watercourses regulated groundwater level and assist in dispersing floodwater from the land in case of intense rain. Our central objective by this movement is to bring Juhu together. People, places, and the diverse natural areas, and in that process, celebrate their interdependent and inseparable interconnectedness. I just go one slide back to show you in this map, the extreme left yellow is the iconic Juhu beach, where millions flock every week, every day for leisure and recreation and for celebrations. And then there are mangroves, there are wetlands, and everything that Juhu has, in a way, is a kind of a microcosm of the city's natural and ecological diversity that we can experience. Through this plan, we have generated an active and pulsating system of interconnected public spaces that forms the heart of Juhu. On both sides of the waters, we will be able to meet, walk, cycle, and loiter. Also on either side, we have proposed and developed city forests by planting thousands of trees that help in mitigating the high level of carbon emission and rising temperatures, thereby lowering the heat island effect that we are subject to in cities now, which are affecting both our mental and physical health conditions increasingly, particularly through high-dense settlements and high-rise and high-density settlements. At the time when Irla Nala reinvigoration movement was launched, the municipal authorities wondered why this was important. And this is a story that even Harini was telling us about when we were walking along the lake and its restoration that she and her friends and others were involved with. And this is the usual attitude as to why is this important. Also, the people living in Mumbai generally associate nallas with dirt, filth, and odor. That's the common connotation. Over the years, there's very little public knowledge of them being rivers and natural watercourses that define the landscape of the city at one point of time. Battling such impediments, the movement continued. Comprehensive plans and implementation programs were created through active citizens' participation. Meetings were held in public places. Sorry, I missed a slide. This is the urban forest slide that I talked about, where we planted thousands of trees along the corridor, along the watercourses, the Nala. Meetings were held in public places with posters. Juhugiri Pyar Se, taken from a colloquial slang, Dadagiri, which means by coercive force. Here it is reinterpreted as the collective power of the people of Juhu. Pyar Se means with a bit of love. And the Vision Juhu book publication communicating the project were published, and it was widely spread. There were numbers of dialogues across multiple different kinds of people in that area. It's fascinating. It's a small area, but there are slums, there are coolies. Coolies are the fishing communities. There are middle class, extremely rich people, the big film stars, whether it's Amitabh Bachchan or anybody, they all live in that, just in that small area. And, it's kind of, there are 14 educational institutions within that area. And all of them, very interestingly, happen to be along the Irla Nala. So we were connecting all of that together through public dialogue and discourse. The Irla Nala reinvigoration plan, advocating the Juhu Vision Plan, and covers an area of 4 square kilometers, focuses on cleaning through bioremedial measures and turning the waters of a polluted and much abused natural watercourse and its immediate precinct into a vibrant public space and a neighborhood forecourt, generating rich social, political, and environmental dividends. Now, it was very interesting. While we were getting to this water cleaning process with NEERI, IIT, and associating all kinds of people at the ground level, the commissioner stands up and says, hey, why do this? Because you won't get the purest water that is, potable. So let's aim for a potable water. So then the BMC makes up a proposal of 150 crores, the cleaning process, transforming this water to be potable. And soon, obviously, the plan was dropped at that point. And our proposal suggested a measure of just 40 lakhs, 35 to 40 lakhs through certain bioremedial measures. And so, but the authorities didn't go that way. They still didn't get convinced. And somehow they attempted to keep blocking this proposal of the water cleaning process. We are still struggling. It's been over 10 years. But one of the points to mention here, each of the projects that I'll show you has taken 10, 12, 14, 15 years and still continuing. So the point I'm making is that any transformation, any public intervention, any collective action would require 3 big things: patience, perseverance, and tenacity to continue with the movement. Because that's where we lose out often. And that's where the governments then take over, or the place just falls apart. If there is one thing I must state, and here, sorry, I just will quickly show you the cleaning process. I don't know how to play this. Yeah, this is 1 minute, but I'll cut it short. Unfortunately, we inherited the concrete walls on either side, already built by the corporation. Essentially, filtration processes, beds, settling tanks, and then the flower plants and others floating beds that cleans and provides oxygen to the water. And then the public spaces on either side, which were cleared after the big floods in Mumbai. All across the 300 kilometers of the Nalas, we have 6 meters on either side cleared by the corporation for the maintenance of the Nalas, and those to be converted as public spaces. But it's not just linear. Then what we're doing is connecting those linear strips to the hinterlands of the neighborhoods, connecting the DP reservations, open spaces, and getting into the quarters. So there's then, in the process, you start developing a large network of the commons or the public spaces in that process. So I'll just sort of shut it there, get to the next. interventions to demonstrate change. This is one of the things that I've been talking about. If there's one thing I must state as being the most important learning from my living and working in Mumbai, it is the need for collective intervention in the current trend of exclusionary urban development, with an objective of achieving social and environmental equity and justice. Also, as a necessary condition, each individual intervention would have to be linked, and this is very important. Also, as a necessary condition, each individual intervention would have to be linked to other democratic rights struggle, thereby building networks of interventions to evolve an alternate vision of the city. So we have to hold hands with all movements across the city on all different interests and sectors to building a larger and more powerful people's movement. And these are some slides of during the Illanala movement. It's all mixed actually, of public spaces and how these movements in various parts of the city, and I'll come to some of the slides a bit later, has helped communities and neighborhood people gain confidence to come out and participate and engage with their places and their neighborhoods. These are some slides of the Illanala movement before and after, and it's very active today with thousands of people walking and loitering and spending time. The project is still not over, as I mentioned. A lot of it still remains. But what's interesting about all these projects that I'll show you through this process, they have been undertaken on voluntary capacity, not just by our office, by everybody engaged. There's no funding from the state at all, excepting what we did through our collective force is convince the members of parliament and the elected MLAs, who get huge sums of money to spend as they like in their constituency. Like an MP today gets something like 30 crores to spend in a 5-year tenure in their constituency. So we tapped Shabana Azmi, we tapped Javed Akhtar, Sunil Dutt, Priya Dutt, and many, many other elected representatives. And that's the money which is the public money spent for these public projects. This is the first time this happened, because they used to flirt with their monies by, little pavements somewhere, little ladis somewhere. And, a lot of the fund is diverted and misused. So we got them together. And the rule is that when such funds are spent, only public institutions like Mahada and the corporation are authorized to execute those projects. But the better thing was that the committees of the citizens of each neighborhood were vigilant and were maintaining accounts. And these accounts were being pasted in public places all the time. So the officials were very, very, concerned and careful in the expenditures that they were incurring in implementing this project. And there was certain supervision by technical people like me and certain other conservation engineers and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting process. I won't get into these details of each process. It's a long, long way to go. It is with this objective that I consider building relationships collectively between people and with nature as an important mission. Then there's this Cafe Azmi Udyan, Kishore Kumar Bagh, Vijay Tendulkar Rang Manch, all along the Irla Nala. And these kinds of various social and cultural spaces have been developed. Intervention in the interest of sustainability through such movements is a significant political struggle. And the Nala reinvigoration of political means towards the deepening our understanding of the many dimensions of power and its uses and abuses. People steer intervention movements, and movements in turn attracts more people. The reinvigoration of the Irla Nala and the 300 kilometers of the Nallas in Mumbai has inspired participation and the coalition of people's movements for rights. Change that is brought about through collective interventions, particularly by the excluded and marginalized people, are incredible means of harnessing insurgent knowledges and people's power and the democratization of the natural resources and the city. I quote here Chandra Talpade Mohanty, who writes in a book, Insurgent Voices, Gender, Justice and Solidarity, recently published in New York. And I quote, "Insurgent knowledges are knowledges that demystify the circuits of power and draw on historical legacies of resistance to create spaces where democratic anti-colonial, non-hierarchical, non-exploitative relationships, identities, and communities can be imagined and practiced. Unquote. So these were newspaper, cuttings of various things, the movements along the Irla Nala project. Now building new relationships. In the redeveloped sections of Irla Nala, a new relationship between people and public space that includes the Nala waters is slowly but surely emerging. What was for many years a filthy backyard to the city and the neighborhood has now been transformed into a forecourt of social, cultural activity. So you have amphitheaters, you have Vijay Tendulkar, Rangmanch, etc. A sense of pride and belonging can be seen in the people who live around these waterfronts and in those who visit. Such emerging relationships are particularly significant at a time when there is a huge deficit of relationships that are based on the question of sustainable ecology, the environment in particular. This is extremely important. It is such relationship that cannot be separated from one another and considered exclusive. And I quote here Piquet, Cadenzo, and Macrath, who write, rather together they form the urban ecosystem. The two together are inextricably both human and biophysical, unquote. With the Nalla as a protagonist and the public spaces being the main planning criteria, we hope to bring about, over a period of time, social change, promoting collective culture and rooting out alienation and false sense of individual gratification promoted by the market. This is a huge thing. Unjust social systems are inherently unsustainable. The linear parks created along the Nallas and their networks will create more livable neighborhoods for more people in an equitable way. This equitable expression of nature-based solutions is sustainable. There is another interesting chapter, but I'll kind of skip it. And this is very important, but I'm deciding to skip that at the moment because of time. Maybe, I don't know how I'm doing in terms of time, which is really the choice of people and places. And I'll just sort of mention one or two small points here. To promote and sustain this much needed equitable relationship, it would be necessary to pay attention to the choice of place and people. Whom we engage with and where we engage with matters most. As I mentioned, as cities being divided and being walled across between people and places and communities, we often land up with projects in better off areas where already the governments have paid attention. So we have to be extremely careful, like for example, the slums in Mumbai or the Koli communities in Juhu, and how can all of them participate? So that's the central objective of this chapter. Now, way forward, connecting the dots, as I put it. This was a slide of Mumbai, which really shows that contrast of the very affluent high-rise Mumbai and the Koli communities and slums on the other side of the bay, on the same stretch. Connecting the dots to create a new ecology of cities calls upon to consciously move beyond our settled preoccupation with much needed individual projects and places towards building collective engagements and interventions in the making of an interconnected city. This can be done by connecting the dots between multiple disparate engagements that are rooted in the idea of restoration, conservation, recycling, reinvigoration, reappropriation, taking into account all existing reality of natural areas and settlements, largely the informal and the illegal, which can be scaled up to the city-wide scale. Now, over the past several years, we in the PKDA practice have worked over 25 public projects in our voluntary capacity. Voluntary is not a good word, maybe in the loss of word, maybe I'm saying that, but we've contributed to the city, to the associations and committees of people, engaged with them, learned a hell of a lot from them. And this cuts across slums redevelopment projects, public spaces, restoration of ecological assets, to rights movements. challenging policy and preparing alternate policy, etc., etc. And these are some slides just to explain the waterfronts of Bandra West. It's close to 2 kilometers, which started with Shabana Azmi's fund as a member of parliament. And you can see the slide on the left of before, and today it's one of the most popular waterfronts in the western suburbs. You then have the Kata Road waterfront, which is another about 2 kilometers, which integrates the Koli village of the Koliwada at Kata Road end. And you have this wonderful space where carnivals happen. There's this 1 month long festival, the Bandra Festival, that takes place, addressing many issues of the town. We restored the Gateway of India precinct by removing a large cordoned off garden at the heart of the Gateway precinct, which was the left slide that you can see at one time, with very little space left for the public. We opened up that garden, reduced the space, expanded the public space, opened it up for free access and use, etc., etc. So I can go on. The Juhu Beach Restoration Project, and some of these battles go from High Court to Supreme Court. They're challenged by many other people, etc., land sharks, including governments. And at each point, fortunately, both in Bandra and in Juhu, we have won across courts. And Juhu and the Supreme Court, in fact, appointed a monitoring committee with all the commissioners, various departments, because they sort of play with us, with the public, by kicking the ball to the other. And in the process, nothing happens, and we keep just running and get tired. And the Supreme Court put them together into one committee, including myself on the committee, to implement the Juhu Beach Redevelopment and Restoration Plan, which was prepared by us collectively. So courts have reacted positively when an alternate plan is put up to them with a large support base. And these are some of there are many pitfalls, there are many drawbacks, there are setbacks, I would call, not drawbacks, but they have to be slowly overcome. It's like I keep saying, like Mao Zedong famously said, 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. There will always be these challenges. This can be done by connecting the dots between multiple disparate engagements that are rooted in the idea of restoration, conservation, recycling, I'm repeating this point, reinvigoration and reappropriation, taking into account all existing reality. So nobody is to be excluded, evicted, thrown out of they are contributing to the economy of the city. They're as important as everybody else. And how do we account? So a master plan or a planning of an area is not done from the top. It must start from the bottom, taking into account all existing reality. And this was an argument which I had made actually at the United Nations Habitat Congress in Quito. This is a structural change that breaks down multiple barriers created through prevailing mainstream planning and city making to achieve for all social and environmental justice through slums and through many other areas. Then there are larger questions that I must point out, but not really discussed in this forum at the moment, but I have to mention them, is to land misutilization, the land use equity issues, exclusionary city planning, density crisis, heat island effect, and development justice. I mean, these are issues that cuts across all of us in every city, across many parts of the world, in which vast numbers of people are discriminated against and subject to climate crisis. Today, with privatization, land and resources too are captured by a few. As a result, today, there is no land available for most people to live happily hereafter. We've seen the example of Mumbai slums redevelopment. Slums dwellers are pushed to 1/3 of the land that they occupy, and the 2/3 taken away by builders for profit. And that 1/3 then leads to densities like 1,400 tenements per hectare onto 25 to 30 story buildings. This is the way, so there is no land. At this point, I'd like to take a short break and play this Udi Guthrie singing. How do I play this? I'm sorry. It's playing? This land is your land. It's our land. It's a fabulous song, but bear with me for less than a minute, but it's wonderful to listen to this music. Kya ho raha hai?
This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, and I saw above me that endless skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
So that was celebrating the interconnectedness or the connectedness between people and places, natural and built environment between nature and people, and the various movements around these issues is an effective way to start creating the new ecology of cities. Done this way, we will not only create sustainable and inclusive cities, but also expand the commons, build a liberating environment for all, ensure just development, achieve sustainability beyond the lip service it gets now, and celebrate our secular and plural social fabric. I just move quickly to the next kind of topic, the neighborhood-based city planning, which I've been arguing as a way forward. So what time? Okay, yeah, I'm finishing in 10 minutes. Sure. The IRLA project is a demonstration of the importance of neighborhood-based planning and designs for the preparation of the city's development plans. Such an approach facilitates local people's active participation in matters concerning their area, which they know best, while influencing the city's planning and development decisions. They're self-explanatory. I don't need to do that. I mean, lots of movements and the coverages in the press, providing a city's seafront change, winds of change, etc., putting the fort back to the people in Bandra, etc. Through a neighborhood-based development approach, it is possible to decentralize and localize projects, thus breaking away the monolithic planning and design ideas that are disconnected from most people and often serve the interests of the few, not the many. Master plans for cities are generally top-down models drafted by elite groups of designers and fail to engage with people on their ideas. Just a short example, when Mumbai, the corporation hired a French firm to do the development plan of the city, and within a year they had to be thrown out due to opposition from the public. With localized projects, the planning of cities will hopefully become a bottom-up process with participation of all the people. Importantly, neighborhood scale work is a more collaborative approach to city and placemaking. For people, this project has allowed the immediate reclamation, redesign, and reprogramming of public spaces within their localities. Importantly, the Ilanala plan and the movement demonstrates that such ideas relating to the expansion of public spaces could not have been envisioned by a formal master planning process. For me, it is urban planning and design that provides incredible power for the achievement of the objective of the interconnectedness of people, places, and nature. It's a very powerful tool if used that way. It is for this reason that I've been arguing that participation in urban planning and design need to be considered a right, and that popularization and democratization of the same is indeed important. I will get to the last, these are slides of various waterfront projects that we did. This is the Land's End, the hill which had been devastated by a 5-star hotel adjoining the hill. We got it back up to the, fighting up to the Supreme Court, and then we restored the hill, the palm trees, and it's a cultural arena today. The only cultural space anywhere on the waterfronts of the city. After 8 or 5. So this is the last, this is the conclusion. Weaving the city fabric, celebrating the interconnectedness. Open Mumbai plan or a linear parks network is an example of making the invisible visible, and how open spaces and natural areas that for long had been kept out can be recognized and can be the foundation of city planning. We don't necessarily see what we look at. And to quote John Bergen in his book, Ways of Seeing, to look at is an act of choice, unquote. We see only when we realize a relationship between things and ourselves. Unfortunately, over the years, The natural areas have been of no value and therefore attacked and disassociated from us. Instead, these are the kinds of, ecological treasures of the city of Mumbai. Instead, I would like to view cities from social and environmental perspective and understand how the two together constitute a necessary condition and their persuasion a means for the achievement of a higher state of urbanization of the city. The two are inextricably entwined or intertwined, and neither are exclusive. Thus, a sustainable ecology of cities is possible when we can successfully combine environmental and socio-economic dimensions equally in the plans and actions that we pursue. As a matter of fact, it is the extent of their integration and inclusion that forms a criteria, as I argue, by which we evaluate the value of our work and engagements. Today, pressures are mounting by the day with government's overwhelming commitment to big, capital-intensive, high-turnover projects at the cost of public and environmental interest. Big projects draw big agencies, corporatization, big finance, and centralization of power and control. Small, low-cost, nature-friendly ideas through community networks and works are considered a hindrance to development goals. The failed state of urbanity in cities is staring at us when we know that city making is the most effective means for the achievement of the goals of urbanization. But this is for a discussion at a later date. I don't equate the state of cities now as with urbanization. We often refer to urbanization, urban centers. I don't do that because urbanization is a state of equality, of access, etc., etc. Today, I argue cities in India are in a dire state of suburban condition, where exclusion and deprivation and colonization of public resources and of the vast numbers of people alongside recurring climate disasters with greater frequency and intensity is the reality. Despite the many adversities, our ground-up sustainability efforts and protracted struggles for restoration, conservation, and integration at all levels concerning people and nature must continue unabated. Linear parks network aim at breaking and overcoming the dominant order of segregation and centralism by creating multiple non-barricaded, non-exclusive, non-hierarchical, non-elitist spaces. It could create a truly representative people's plan for cities with sustainable ecology, evolved through and in turn strengthening the rights-based movements in the city.
Would you sing We Shall Overcome with me, please? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Yes. Hello, sir. I'm Pooja. I'm a master's here. I'm doing my master's in climate change and sustainability from Azim Premji University. And my question is about climate refugees. So I think that they exist at the intersection of social ostracism and nature's fury. And where do they go? And how would you classify a climate refugee? Is it someone who has suffered from a flood, who has been displaced by a flood, or someone who's dying of a heat stroke because of climate change? It's extremely difficult to pinpoint who is a climate refugee, and how are you going to incorporate them into cities? Like, as we know, the people who were displaced by the Sardar Sarovar Dam project, they still haven't been adequately rehoused, and they haven't been able to find places to live. So we haven't been able to deliver justice to people who have been evicted and orphaned decades ago. And how are we going to create space for the people who are going to become evicted and orphaned in the years to come, and who are facing all of those issues right now?
Hi, sir. Thank you for the lecture. And I'm Ritu. I'm also pursuing MSc Climate Change in Azim Premji University. And my question is similar to Pooja's. So when you show the slide of that buildings over there and slums aside that, this came up in my mind, and then the vision slide was there, that how the Juhu beach vision is over there. So I just want to ask, in all those projects, definitely it'll just help in the aesthetic appealing of the cities and green planning and all of that stuff. But are there any measures to ensure that all these slum communities living around there equally relocated or being compensated, or yeah.
Okay.
And one more thing, if like you said that people are being participating in that thing, all the slum areas and communities are participating in those projects. Was that voluntary, or like were they even dignified because of that projects, and were they happy about that projects? Because I just want to know more about, if I can read more on that thing.
Well, I'll be very brief in my answers because there is a certain overlap in your questions. I think I've answered the first question and a part of the second question when I said very clearly that we can develop the cities in an inclusive way by taking into account all existing reality. Okay, that one line, in a way, underlines the answer. That planning is not something that you do from outside, but you take every existing reality into account, and there is enough land, enough resources. I won't get into that subject again, which can be utilized equally and justly. Slum dwellers, Koli communities have participated. I would say not to the extent the middle class would participate, because the idea of beautification captures mind and attention. But as leaderships and movements are concerned, the movement being the leadership, it goes beyond the ideas which are popular, quote unquote, propagated by the governments. Traffic islands beautified, little gardens beautified, etc., which captures popular mind. So the idea of movements, it sort of sorts out these questions. It discusses these questions collectively, not at an individual leadership level. And we found that, for example, you saw some slides on Bandra Bandstand. I mean, the Koli communities, the women who never get out to a commons, come and squat on the promenade. While the richest on the Carter Road, some of the film stars like even Amir Khan, who lives on that, is jogging by with his most expensive shoes and outfits. And that's an unbarricaded space. One of the things we try to do is not put fences, not put gates. So it's accessible to all. So some of these fundamentals have to be addressed. It's a long way to go. I'm not claiming all problems are solved. Problems will come and we have to take them head on collectively.
There's one by Raj and one by Mulidhar, but just 1 second. I just wanted to add one thing, Ritu, because I have walked this with him. And I think design plays a role, because one of the things he showed me was that they deliberately don't design. You put steps. You see lots of steps, plain steps. Because he said when you design, you exclude certain people. And so that's why you have the Pehelwans coming and doing kushti in the morning, the ladies from the Koli community, once they finish the fishing, cleaning the fish, coming, and then you have the joggers and walkers, because it's a plain space and you can modify it, I mean, how you interpret it. But the moment you landscape too much, you exclude people. At least that's what
I think that the point is that open spaces must be open, physically and metaphorically speaking. What many architects do, we community of architects do is we get into designing every bit of detail and space. We occupy space. We divide spaces. And then we expect people to behave the way we have conceived spaces. So the biggest challenge for architects in public spaces movement is to be careful what to design and when to design and where to design and where to leave open space, open and clear forever. Brings people to function as they wish and they can, then to act and play. I think that's something that as an architect I've been challenged by. Because historically we've imbibed these skills and knowledge through schools that, we have to capture space through design effort. So I think that's an important point.
And I see a lot of questions, so be brief, Raj.
Okay.
And everybody, if I can request.
Hello, sir. Myself, Raj. I am also a student of climate change and sustainability from Azim Premji University. So I have a question like, since development is necessary, we need to protect the environment, but development of infrastructure is also very, very necessary. Like you have mentioned the case of the flyover development in the Mumbai. So what I think in most of the cases, what I have seen, the political wills, especially the politicians, the governments, becomes hurdle in the case, in the path of the environmentalists. Like we have seen in the Aravali Hills and also in many of the cases. So as per your experience, since you are environmentalist, present environmentalist, and we are going to become the future environmentalist. So in your opinion, you have a lot of experience, lot of field experience, lot of many show experience. So in your opinion, what could be the ways that we environmentalists can incorporate them in the path of the sustainability?
Firstly, you've given a new adjective to my name. I'm not an environmentalist.
Excellent presentation, sir. Of recent, we have been reading about and hearing about Mumbai's development of the undersea tunnel, Setu, then a whole lot of metro network and roads and fast cars moving around, etc. As compared to that, this is a total, revelation, I would think. It's a fantastic presentation that you made. Seeing all of those, what we have been reading about, I thought, the unfortunate thing is Bangalore is trying to replicate all of that, those tunnels and all those kinds of things. As compared to that, this is an excellent presentation. This is what we should be modeling to. I think Harini should ensure that Bangalore is saved from those kinds of development, and instead we go this way. Maharashtra had been going through a lot of political turmoil. Through all of that, you managed to get the backing of the politicians. That is fantastic, if you manage that. Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm all of their classmate Lakshmi. So I'll quickly come to an extremely wonderful presentation. I think we've been dealing with a lot of gloom, like how she was saying, and this is very hopeful. But I have a two-part question. One is, you said one question, then I will ask the most important for me. You said tenacity of a group. Is it the same group of people that are continuing over all these years? And if the groups are changing, how do you maintain this?
Okay, let me answer these three questions. I think the first two questions are similar. Firstly, let me tell you, my dear, I didn't get your name, but Raj, that flyovers and roads are not infrastructure projects. Why are we enamored by them? In Mumbai, 2% people use private cars, but we don't develop public transportation, and we are spending 30,000 crore announcements every month for a new road, underground tunnel, etc., etc. In fact, these must be considered as infrastructure projects, the commons. And commons is a big word, so I'm not detailing that out. So that's the first part of the answer. The second is, well, you have to negotiate by persuasion and force with the political leadership. And so Juhugiri Pyar se is a kind of language that I talked about. On one hand, a coercive force, and on the other face, a bit of love. So but that's a long, I can get into a very long answer how these strategies work, how we mobilize people, how eminent and well-known people come into movements who also contribute significantly by finding easy access to important decision makers, and in the process, movements getting closer to the political leadership. But these people that we tapped for finance or funding were not in the government. Yeah, some of them were in the part of the ruling party, but they were not necessarily in the government. But if they have to sustain and get votes the next time in their area, they better contribute. So it depends on the pressures people put. That makes the difference. So that's a kind of a short answer. These are very long and complex questions. Did I miss out any part of the question? Yeah, so I will not go beyond that at this point to answer that question. But the point is that these should be seen as simmering fires, never to be extinguished. They have to be kept going, simmering. And I think that's the hope. Someday we shall overcome. I mean, I'm just being a little romantic about it.
Yeah, hi. Hi.
But I address the politics question in the sense, I think sustaining is very difficult. No, there is never one group throughout the city which is running like people's leadership role. No, each area has its own committee or group of people putting up its own leadership, and people who join them, like us, like me, we have to be extremely careful to listen to all of them very carefully. There are plenty of ideas, and we discuss them in public forums through collective dialogues, and they are sorted out. So one of the slides here was Shabana Azmi standing on the promenade. There's police and the whole authorities who came to arrest all of us because the governments never gave us permission to execute the promenade in Bandra to start with when we put up the proposal. But the force was such of the people's movement, we decided to create a people's chain. We got a contractor and we physically started laying the tiles. It's like a mock drill. And soon the press came, the police came, the television landed up. It became such a furor that the next day it was all over in the press, and the corporation gave us the permission the next day. So the same thing happened with Juhu, same thing happened in many other places. So I think these are kind of, tactics and strategies of movements, which is, we can go on at length to discuss these things. And the whole thing about civic administration, there's another question, and people's control over the powers of the municipal corporation and how to administer. You all are working together on many questions, Chandavarkar. I've read in the question of cities about how Bangalore Municipal Corporation functions and how it ought to be, etc., etc. The same debate goes over in Delhi. The same thing is in Mumbai, everywhere. But those are, beyond the scope at this point to really get into and discuss.
Yeah, hi, this is Benedict from Sustainability Next magazine. Now that you've started this and they're taken off well, sustaining them over many years can become a challenge. Do you have any system put in place that is going to sustain?
It's a simple idea. One person is not doing it everywhere to sustain it. You lit a fire, and people in every neighborhood rise up. They come forward in their ways to intervene. So when 15 years back we started with a project in Juhu, or 20 years back on Juhu Beach restoration, I mean, this whole idea of citizens' engagement with public sphere, public cause, public spaces was very little. But then every neighborhood now has citizens' association. I'm not getting into the question of citizenship. I'm not getting into the question of who is citizen and who is not. And we have those movements politically happening across the country of de-recognizing people and throwing them out of the net. I'm not getting into all of that. But in every area of the city, in every neighborhood of the city of Mumbai, there is a stirring movement. people do come up, there are contradictions. There are contradictory aspirations and demands, overwhelmingly overtaken by the upper classes or the middle classes in so-called citizens' movements. But that's when in Bandra, citizens' movements, upper class citizens' movement, demanded gates and compound wall to keep people out. We insisted in having them unbarricaded, and we maintained it that way for the last 20 years. And believe me, there's no litter you walk on Bandra Band. Public behavior changes, social relations changes, and all that impacts, and that's political power that emerges and develops through that process. So it's a kind of a big idea, but small steps towards it.
Thank you so much for your talk, sir, and it was incredibly, incredibly interesting. I'm Iman Bhattacharya. I'm an impact consultant with Satwa, and I have an. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a background in architecture, so this was incredibly interesting coming back to a talk like this after quite a few years. So my question to you here is: what we are seeing across in several cities now is we're seeing the different social classes increasingly becoming further and further away from each other. So we're seeing exclusive spaces emerging, something that you were talking about right now, that, more gated walls, more gated colonies, places where they hang out are getting more and more exclusive. In this day and age, what do you tell us, the youngsters who want to pursue development like this? How do we do this moving ahead? How do we bring the people together in spaces, particularly in times when, in our cities, for instance, in Bangalore, we have public parks, but the public parks stay closed from 10 a.m. till about 5 p.m. So the peak period when the regular public needs to be accessing places. So we're seeing that development in even where there are spaces that is happening, that these spaces are getting increasingly closed down for people for whom it has been developed.
You were multiple questions, actually. So just to answer only one part of the question, or maybe that will partly cover all your questions, is yes, there is an increasing pressure. I concluded with that. There is an increasing pressure on all of us. The polarization is extreme at this point of time. The violence that I started with in my introduction is what we are affected by. But the question is, I just used linear parks as a metaphor. We have to find ways, using that as a metaphor, that could cut across these barriers. Here is an example of a linear, is a physical intervention by way of creating a linear public space that notionally kind of cuts across these barriers. It's not an answer to completely, erasing the polarization and the differences that different people and communities have, but it's a step forward, and a significant step forward of sharing space, of sharing resources, where we are increasingly being told to be individual and being independent of the other by the free market forces, liberalization and privatization. We have to fight that. So linear park to me is a metaphor that I've conveniently used as a physical planner to explain an idea.
Hi, my name is Sarah. So my question is the design of linear parks specific to the city of Mumbai, or can it be replicated in a radially expanding city like Bangalore? And does it have anything to do with the shape of the city?
Yeah, it can be. We did it for Pimpri Chinchwad master plan, which is like Bangalore in terms of its spread, which is not a linear city. So linear park is not a line. Linear park is an idea of breaking barriers. So whatever the form of the city be, whatever ways of, whatever assets of natural areas that you have may differ. Every city doesn't have the mangroves and the wetlands, etc., but would have something else. So it's an idea of breaking those barriers, basically. And we have to look at it from that point of view. And as architects and planners, how do we, because one thing we've learned through architecture, that physical space influences relationships and ways of life. Social scientists for years together have written books, including David Harvey, on the commitment that people and communities shape space and influence built environment. I have a different view now, seeing the way our cities are developing. It's the builders who make spaces and we fit into those spaces. We are subject to it. The entire phenomena of making spaces, or the art of making cities as an urban center, has been completely displaced. We are subsumed by this enormous power structure that has emerged. So people no more make spaces. We adjust to the spaces that are created by somebody else who's alien to our interest and to the larger community interest, tragically.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ronak. I'm from Art Park at IISc Bangalore. So my question was, because I work in the domain of climate and health, so a lot of the actions that you see today, heat islands, floods, urban flooding, is very post facto, after an incident has happened. Whereas there was a very recent article by Nachiket Moore which talked about how, while we are all focusing on preventive health, the cities today are not designed for preventive health to be prioritized. Like, are there any conversations happening in this front? Because the young generation is very focused on preventive health.
Just to cut short, a brief answer, yes. What is extremely important is public health. For the nature of development now in cities is causing havoc to health, both by the fact of built form and the built environment. I showed a slide of that, the way slums are being redeveloped. And on the other hand, the complete destruction of the natural ecology. Trees are being ripped apart and thrown and cut. And trees is a fascinating warrior and works for our protection all the time. So yes, we have to work towards that. As an architect, we've tried to do slum rehabilitation projects in different ways that fights the density issue that causes heat island effect. And have been, there are interesting studies in Mumbai where slum rehabilitation projects now find high rates, increasing rates of tuberculosis in the rehabilitation colonies and deteriorating mental health conditions. Leave apart the privacy issues of women and the space for children and the way they are growing up. And women are constantly being abused in those quarters with lack of privacy, with the kind of density there. They're all the time under gaze. So there are many, many, many issues of gender, of health, and so many, many other issues of civic concerns that emerges from the way we are now making cities. So I try to therefore talk about this idea of connectedness and the making of city as the title of my talk today.
Hi, my name is Ashfaq. My question is that, I'm sorry if I missed this, I missed the first 15-20 minutes of the talk, but having been to many collectives and open consultations, trying to be part of these movements, I see that there's maybe unknowingly a trend of better off people forming parts of these committees and coalitions and consultations. And I understand that it is because they have more sense of ownership, because they have sense of ownership over the roof of their head, unlike migrants and lower class workers who struggle to even find accommodation. So how, in your project, how were you able to instill or tap into that sense of ownership of people like the Koli community and of migrant workers, daily wage workers, etc., and also maintain an equal sense of ownership in these consultations?
Well, I wouldn't claim to be equal. Achievements are seldom equal. There are differences. But as I said, there's some improvement in the relationships of those breaking those barriers. So the poor have benefited, not to the extent maybe the rich have benefited. But one thing I have realized is intervention and demonstrating change. The thing about physical change is what demonstrates change, which becomes very attractive then to people. They get convinced easily. If we've been able to capture a space and transform it and make it into an active, pulsating public space, that has its own influence. And to some extent, these differences are then diffused by the fact of that physical intervention. So demonstrating change has been one of the objectives of our movement. Small, big is not the point. Demonstrating change by way of unbarricading spaces, for example, is a big step forward in every term of the discussion, whether it's social, political, environmental, in every sense, it's significant. That one line, unbarricading spaces. So, yeah, so yes, it's not perfect. No, it has to evolve. Movements will evolve ways forward. That's the best forum to do that.
And a huge thank you. I think, hope you'll join me in a big round of applause for PK Das.